The old cantina on Kepler Station was dark and smoky. Commander Zixthara sat at the corner table, his forearms wrapped around a glass of bitter alien liquor. Young soldiers from different worlds crowded around him. They wanted to hear war stories. They always did. You want to know about humans? Zixthara's voice was rough like grinding stone. I will tell you about the Battle of Vega Prime. That was the day I learned to fear them. The young aliens leaned closer. One of them, a bird-like creature with bright feathers, chirped softly. Fear humans? But they are so small and weak. Zixthara's tentacles twisted in what might have been a smile. It was not a pleasant sight. Small, yes. Weak? No. Never call them weak. He took a long drink and began his tale. 3 years ago, Zixthara commanded the Coalition's 4th battle fleet. 200 warships, each one bigger than a human city. They were the pride of 7 different worlds. The Coalition had sent them to crush the human colony at Vega Prime. Intelligence reports said the humans had only 30 ships defending the system. 30 against 200. It should have been easy. It should have been over in hours. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded the human fleet from his flagship, the UES Liberty. Zixthara had studied the humans' record. Morrison was known for strange tactics. The Coalition called him unpredictable. They should have called him dangerous. The battle began at dawn, Vega Prime time. The Coalition fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Zixthara felt proud watching his ship spread across space like a metal cloud. Each ship was armed with the best weapons the galaxy could build. Scan for enemy vessels, Zixthara ordered from his command ship. Sir, we detect 30 human ships, just as intelligence reported, his sensor officer replied. The officer was a tall, thin creature with green skin and too many eyes. They are moving to intercept. Zixthara nodded. This would be quick. The humans were brave but foolish. They should have run. The human ships approached in a loose formation. They looked small against the massive Coalition fleet. Zixthara could see the UES Liberty leading them, with Admiral Morrison aboard. Behind, it came ships like the UES Thunder, the UES Storm, and others. All ships prepare to fire, Zixthara commanded. Target the human flagship first. But something strange happened. Just as the Coalition ships locked their weapons, the human ships vanished. Not destroyed, vanished. One moment they were there on every screen and sensor, the next moment nothing. Where did they go? Zixthara demanded. His sensor officer's eyes were spinning in confusion. Sir, I don't know. They just disappeared. All sensors show empty space. Zixthara felt his first touch of worry. In 30 years of war, he had never seen anything like this. Ships did not just disappear. Keep scanning. They have to be somewhere. For 20 minutes, the Coalition fleet searched empty space. Their most advanced sensors found nothing. It was as if the 30 human ships had never existed. Then the attacks began. The Coalition ship Vengeance was the first to die. It exploded without warning, torn apart by weapons fire from nowhere. Zixthara watched the debris spread across space. There had been 800 alien souls aboard that ship. Where did the attack come from? He shouted. Unknown, sir. Sensors show no enemy ships in that area. Before anyone could respond, another Coalition ship died, then another. The human ships were attacking, but they remained completely invisible. It was like fighting ghosts. Captain Lisa Grant commanded one of the human ships, the UES Phantom. Later, Zixthara would learn her name from captured records. But during the battle, she was just a nightmare that hunted his fleet. The Phantom would appear for seconds behind a Coalition ship. Its weapons would fire, usually destroying the target in one attack. Then it would vanish again before any return. Fire could hit it. The ship lived up to its name. All ships random evasive patterns, Zixthara ordered. Do not stay in one place. But it did not help. The invisible human ship struck again and again. They knew exactly where each Coalition ship would be. It was as if they could see through walls. The psychological effect was worse than the actual damage. Coalition crews began shooting at empty space. They were convinced human ships were everywhere, hiding just out of sight. Some ships fired at their own allies by mistake. Zixthara watched his proud fleet fall apart. These were experienced, soldiers from 7 different worlds. They had fought in dozens of battles. but they had never faced an enemy they couldn't see. On the second day, the humans changed tactics. Instead of quick attacks, they began stalking individual ships. A coalition vessel would detect strange sounds in its hull, scratching, tapping, like something was trying to get inside. Then the ship would explode. The crew of the destroyer reported hearing human voices in their corridors. But security cameras showed nothing. The voices spoke in calm, friendly tones like humans greeting old friends. Then the ship's reactor went critical. "Sir," Zixthera's communication officer said, "we are receiving a transmission from Admiral Morrison. Put it through." The human's voice filled the bridge. It was calm and polite, like he was discussing the weather. "Commander Zixthera, this is Admiral Morrison. I believe we should talk." "Where are you, Morrison? Show yourself." "I'm right here, Commander. We all are. You just can't see us." As Morrison spoke, Zixthera's sensors suddenly detected all 30 human ships. They were scattered throughout the coalition formation. Some were less than a kilometer away from coalition vessels. They had been there the whole time, invisible and patient. "How?" Zixthera whispered. "Human technology, Commander. We've learned to bend light around our ships. Your sensors can't detect us when we don't want to be detected. We've been hunting your fleet for 2 days." Zixthera looked at his tactical display. He had started with 200 ships. Now only 40 remained. The humans had destroyed 160 coalition vessels while staying completely invisible. His entire fleet had been turned into prey. "What do you want, Morrison?" "Your surrender, Commander. You have 2 choices. Order your remaining ships to withdraw, or we continue hunting until none are left." The human admiral paused. When he spoke again, his voice was cold as space. "We can do this all day, Commander." "Can you?" Zixthera looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at him with fear in their eyes. They were professional soldiers, but this battle had broken something inside them. They had been hunted like animals by an enemy they couldn't fight. "If I withdraw, what guarantee do I have that you won't attack us as we leave?" "You have my word as a human officer. Withdraw now, and you leave safely." Zixthera had no choice. His fleet was finished. The humans had won using weapons that should not exist and tactics that defied all military logic. "All ships, withdraw immediately. Set course for home." As the surviving coalition ships prepared to jump to hyperspace, Morrison's voice came through the communications one last time. "Commander Zixthera, a word of advice. Next time, bring more ships. We're getting better at this." The human ships remained invisible as the coalition fleet fled. Zixthera never saw them again. But he knew they were watching, hidden in the darkness, between stars. Later, intelligence reports revealed the truth. The humans had developed something they called adaptive camouflage. Their ships could become invisible to all known sensors. But the technology was limited. They could only stay hidden for short periods before needing to recharge. The Battle of Vega Prime had lasted 3 days. The humans had carefully planned every attack, timing their strikes when their camouflage was strongest. They had turned invisibility into the perfect weapon. Zixthera finished his drink and looked at the young soldiers around him. Their faces showed the same fear he had felt that day. "That was the day I learned the first rule of fighting humans," he said. "Never fight what you cannot see." The cantina was quiet. Outside, a human merchant ship was docking at the station. Its crew looked friendly and peaceful. But Zixthera knew the truth. Every human was a potential ghost, ready to vanish and strike from the shadows. "Are all human ships invisible now?" asked the young bird-like soldier. Zixthera's tentacles twisted again. "I do not know. And that is what makes them so terrifying." Commander Zixthera ordered another drink. The young alien soldiers waited quietly around his table. The story of the ghost ships had shaken them, but they wanted to hear more. They always did. "That was space combat," Zixthera said, his voice low and rough. "You think that was frightening? Let me tell you about ground warfare with humans. Let me tell you about Titan's Reach." A young soldier with gray skin and multiple arms leaned forward. "Ground combat should be easier, yes? Humans are small. We are bigger and stronger." Zixthera's laugh was bitter and cold. "That is what we thought too. We were wrong, very wrong." He began his second tale. Titan's Reach was a human farming colony on the edge of their space. 2 million humans lived there, growing food for other worlds. Most were families with children. It should have been an easy target. The coalition sent 50,000 ground troops to take the planet. They were professional soldiers from the warrior races, big, strong creatures with natural armor and sharp claws. Each one could fight 3 humans and win. General Krextor commanded the invasion. He was a massive creature, 3 meters tall with thick red skin. He had conquered 12 worlds for the coalition. Titan's reach would be number 13. The human defenders numbered only 5,000 soldiers. They were led by Colonel Ryan Davis, a quiet man with gray hair and sad eyes. His second in command was Sergeant Amy Brooks, a small woman who looked like she should be teaching children, not fighting wars. The invasion began before dawn. Coalition dropships landed near the main human cities. The plan was simple: surround the humans, demand surrender, then occupy the planet. Standard procedure. For the first day, everything went according to plan. The coalition forces were bigger, stronger, and better armed. They pushed the human defenders back toward the cities. The humans fought well, but they were clearly losing. General Krextor felt confident. Tomorrow we will have them surrounded, he told his officers. They will surrender when they see they cannot win. But that night, something changed everything. The coalition forces had captured several hundred human civilians during their advance. These were farmers, teachers, shopkeepers. Not soldiers. Just people who lived on Titan's reach. General Krextor decided to send a message. He ordered the execution of 50 human prisoners, including children. The executions were broadcast on all frequencies so the human defenders would see. "Surrender now," Krextor announced, "or more civilians will die." That was his mistake. Humans, Zixthera had learned, do not react to such threats the way other species do. Instead of becoming afraid, they become something else entirely. "Colonel." Davis received the broadcast in his command bunker. Sergeant Brooks was beside him, along with his other officers. They watched their people die on the screen. The humans did not speak for several minutes. When Davis finally spoke, his voice was very quiet. "Sergeant Brooks, activate the Berserker protocols." Brooks looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back." "They killed children, Amy. Our children. Activate the protocols." Zixthara paused in his story to finish his drink. The young soldiers waited, sensing something terrible was coming. "What are Berserker protocols?" asked one of them. "Something that still gives me nightmares," Zixthara replied. The next morning, the coalition forces prepared for their final assault. They expected the humans to surrender or try to escape. They did not expect what actually happened. The first sign something was wrong came from the Eastern Front. A coalition squad was advancing through a human town when they heard a sound. It started low and grew louder. It was human voices, but not speaking words. They were screaming, not in fear or pain, but in rage. Private Danny Lee led the first human charge. He was a young man, barely 20 years old. He had worked on his family's farm before the war, but the person who charged the coalition lines was not a farmer anymore. Lee ran straight at a fortified position held by 20 coalition soldiers. He carried no rifle, no heavy weapons, only a metal bar he had torn from a building and a combat knife. The coalition soldiers opened fire. Plasma bolts hit Lee in the chest, the shoulder, the leg. Any one of those hits should have killed him. But he kept running. The coalition soldiers watched in horror as the human absorbed 17 direct hits and continued charging. Lee reached their position and began fighting with his bare hands and simple weapons. He moved like a wild animal, but with human intelligence behind the madness. In 30 seconds, he had killed 6 coalition soldiers and wounded 8 more before finally falling. But Lee was not alone. Behind him came more humans. Hundreds of them. They had abandoned all military tactics and were simply charging forward, screaming that terrible sound. The coalition soldiers were trained warriors, but they had never faced anything like this. These humans fought like they wanted to die, but they fought smart. They used their rage as a weapon, making themselves unpredictable and terrifying. Sergeant Amy Brooks led another attack on the southern front. She was a small woman, less than 2 meters tall. But when she activated the Berserker protocols, she became something that haunted Zixthera's dreams. Brooks and her squad surrounded a coalition tank. Instead of using anti-tank weapons, They attacked it with their hands. They climbed on it, tore open hatches, and fought the crew inside with knives and fists. The tank crew were elite soldiers in powered armor. It did not matter. The worst part was the sounds. The humans were not just screaming. They were talking to each other as they fought. They made jokes, sang songs, laughed. They acted like this was fun. Watch out, the big one's mine, Brooks called to her soldiers as she jumped on a coalition commander. The commander was twice her size and covered in natural armor. She killed him anyway. By noon, the coalition forces were in full retreat. General Krextor tried to rally his troops, but they were too frightened. They had been trained to fight soldiers, not monsters. "They are just humans," Krextor shouted over the radio. "They can be killed like anyone else." But his soldiers had seen Danny Lee take 17 plasma hits and keep fighting. They had watched Amy Brooks laugh while covered in alien blood. They had heard the human war cries that sounded like demons from the deepest hell. The Berserker protocols did something to human brain chemistry. It shut down their fear and pain responses while keeping their intelligence intact. They became thinking, planning animals who could not be stopped by injury or death. Private Jake Miller was hit by an explosion that tore off his left arm. He picked up the severed limb and used it to beat a coalition soldier unconscious. Then he kept fighting. With his remaining arm, Corporal Lisa Stone was shot through the chest with a hole big enough to put your fist through. She stuffed cloth in the wound and continued fighting for another hour before bleeding to death. Even then, she died while strangling an enemy soldier. The coalition forces broke completely. 50,000 professional warriors fled from 5,000 humans. Many coalition soldiers threw away their weapons and ran into the wilderness rather than face the berserkers again. General Krextor tried to make a final stand at the landing site. He had 2,000 soldiers and heavy weapons. The humans should not have been able to take the position. Colonel Davis arrived with 300 human soldiers. They were covered in blood and dirt. Many were wounded. All of them were still screaming that terrible war cry. "Surrender," Davis called to Krextor. "You have one chance." "Never," Krextor replied. "You are just humans." Davis smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Yes, we are, and you just learned what that means." The final battle lasted 15 minutes. When it was over, Krextor was dead, and his army was destroyed. The humans had lost 100 soldiers, but they had won. But the most terrifying part came after the battle ended. Zixathera watched the recordings later from captured equipment. The moment the fighting stopped, the humans changed back. They became normal people again. Colonel Davis knelt beside a wounded coalition soldier and gave him medical aid. Sergeant Brooks helped evacuate enemy wounded to safety. The same humans who had been savage berserkers minutes before were now showing mercy to their enemies. "That is what makes humans truly frightening," Zixathera told the young soldiers. "They can choose when to be monsters. They turn their humanity on and off like a weapon." One of the soldiers asked, "But why did they become so violent? What made them change?" "They executed children," Zixathera replied. "Humans will forgive many things. They will show mercy to enemies who fight honorably, but harm their young and they become something else entirely." He stood up from the table, his old wounds aching. "That is the second rule of fighting humans. Never make them angry. You will not survive what they become." The young soldiers sat in silence, processing what they had heard. Outside the cantina, human laughter could be heard from the docking bay. Peaceful, friendly sounds. But now the aliens wondered what those same humans would sound like if someone threatened their families. Zixathera left them with that thought. Some lessons were too important to explain gently. The cantina had grown quieter as the night went on. Commander Zixathera noticed that fewer aliens were laughing at the bar. His stories were spreading through the station. Word of human warfare tactics had a way of killing conversation. A young alien with blue scales and worried eyes approached his table. "Commander, may I ask something?" "Speak." "The humans you described, the berserkers, they were soldiers. But what about human civilians? Surely they would run from danger like any reasonable species." Zixathera's tentacles coiled tighter around his glass. "Sit down, young one. Let me tell you about New Geneva. Let me tell you why human civilians are more terrifying than their soldiers." The blue-scaled alien sat down with the others. They all leaned in close to hear the third tale. New Geneva was a human research colony with no military value. It housed 50,000 civilians, scientists, teachers, artists, children. The planet had beautiful cities and peaceful gardens. It should have been safe from the war. But the coalition needed to send a message. They wanted to show other human worlds what happened to those who resisted. General Vorthak chose New Geneva because it was defenseless and full of innocent people. Vorthak was a cold, calculating commander. He believed in winning wars through fear. If humans saw their civilians dying, they would surrender quickly. It was logical thinking. It was also completely wrong. The coalition sent 200 warships to surround New Geneva. The humans had only 6 small patrol ships for defense. Captain Steve Harper commanded the tiny defense fleet from his ship, the Guardian. His second officer was Lieutenant Kate Wilson, a young woman fresh from the academy. "Captain," Wilson reported, "long-range sensors show a massive coalition fleet approaching. 200 ships." Harper studied the tactical display. 6 ships against 200. The math was simple and depressing. "Time until they arrive?" 4 hours, sir." Harper called an emergency meeting with the colonial government. Governor Patricia Adams was a grandmother who had spent her life building schools and hospitals. She was not prepared for war. "Captain, how long can you hold them off?" she asked. Harper was quiet for a moment. He was an honest man who did not like to lie. "Governor, with respect, we cannot hold them off. 6 ships against 200 is not a battle, it's suicide." "Then we surrender?" "No, ma'am. We evacuate every civilian we can, and then we buy you time to escape." The evacuation began immediately. Every ship on New Geneva was loaded with civilians, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even small personal craft. 50,000 people needed to escape, but the ships could only carry 30,000 in the first wave. Governor Adams made the hardest decision of her life. Children and elderly first. Adults will wait for the second evacuation, but there would be no second evacuation. The coalition fleet arrived ahead of schedule. General Vorthak's flagship, the Iron Fist, dropped out of hyperspace with the rest of his armada. They spread out around New Geneva like a metal net. Nothing would escape. "Human vessels, this is General Vorthak. Surrender immediately or we will destroy your colony." Captain Harper responded from the Guardian. "General, we have civilian evacuation, ships leaving the system. They are not military targets. Let them pass. All human ships are targets until you surrender. Order the evacuation fleet to return, or I will destroy them." Harper looked at his small bridge crew. Lieutenant Wilson was barely 25 years old. Ensign Bobby Chen had joined the crew just 6 months ago. They were all young with full lives ahead of them. "Sir, what are your orders?" Wilson asked. Harper made his decision. "We're going to buy those civilians time to escape. All ships, intercept the coalition fleet. Protect the evacuation ships at all costs." The 6 human patrol ships accelerated toward the massive enemy fleet. It was hopeless, but they went anyway. The first human ship died within minutes. The Defender, commanded by Captain Linda Park, lasted just long enough to destroy 2 coalition vessels before being overwhelmed. Her final transmission was calm and professional. "Guardian, the path is clear on Vector 7. Good luck." The second ship, the Protector, lasted longer. Captain Gary Stone managed to take out a coalition cruiser before his ship was torn apart. His crew of 12 died fighting to give strangers a few more minutes to escape. But the real horror began when the coalition fleet caught up to the evacuation ships. These were civilian vessels packed with families and children. They had no weapons and weak shields. They should have surrendered immediately. They did not. The cargo ship Morning Star was the first to be cornered. It carried 800 civilians, including 200 children. Captain Mary Foster was a merchant who had never fired a shot in anger. When General Vorthak demanded surrender, her response shocked everyone. "General, I have children aboard this ship. Their parents trusted me to keep them safe. I will not let you harm them." "Captain, your ship has no weapons. Surrender now, and your passengers will be spared." Foster's laugh came through the radio. It was not a happy sound. "General, you don't understand humans very well. We don't surrender when children are in danger." The Morning Star turned toward the coalition flagship. It accelerated to ramming speed. "Captain Foster, this is suicide. You will all die." Yes, we will. But we'll take some of you with us. Maybe that will give the other ships time to escape. General Vorthak watched in disbelief as the cargo ship charged his flagship. The civilians aboard were singing. He could hear them over the radio. Children's voices mixed with adults, singing old Earth songs as they flew toward certain death. The Morning Star crashed into the Iron Fist's escort destroyer. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire and debris. 800 human civilians died in seconds, but their sacrifice damaged the coalition formation and allowed 3 other evacuation ships to escape. This set the pattern for the rest of the battle. Every time the coalition caught an evacuation ship, the civilians chose to fight rather than surrender. They turned cargo ships into weapons, passenger liners into bombs. The luxury liner Ocean Dreams carried 5,000 civilians. When surrounded, the passengers voted on what to do. The vote was unanimous: fight. Captain Robert Kelly, who had spent his career taking people on peaceful cruises, armed his ship with improvised weapons and charged the enemy. Meanwhile, Captain Harper and Lieutenant Wilson continued their hopeless battle in the Guardian. They were the last military ship left, facing an entire fleet alone. "Captain, our weapons are nearly depleted," Wilson reported. "Hull integrity at 30%, we should retreat." Harper looked at the tactical display. 12 evacuation ships were still trying to escape. If the Guardian withdrew, those civilians would die. "Kate, I need you to listen carefully. We're not going home today." Wilson understood immediately. She was young, but she was not stupid. "Yes, sir. What are your orders?" "We're going to ram Vorthak's flagship. If we take out their command ship, it might disrupt their formation long enough for the last civilians to escape." Wilson nodded. She thought about her family back on Earth. Her parents, her little brother, her boyfriend who was planning to propose when she returned from this assignment. She would never see any of them again. "Sir, before we do this, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think the civilians will make it?" Harper smiled sadly. "Some of them will. That's enough." The Guardian turned toward the Iron Fist. The ship's engines pushed far beyond safe limits, building speed for the final attack. "General Vorthak, this is Captain Harper. You wanted to send a message about attacking human civilians. Here's our message back." The Guardian struck the Iron Fist amidships. The explosion destroyed both ships and killed everyone aboard, including General Vorthak. The coalition fleet lost its commander and its coordination. In the confusion that followed, the remaining evacuation ships escaped. 20,000 human civilians survived because other humans chose to die for them. Strangers died for strangers without hesitation. But the most disturbing part of the battle came in the aftermath. Coalition intelligence analyzed the radio transmissions from the civilian ships. They found something that chilled every alien who heard it. The humans had been calm. Cargo ship captains who chose to ram enemy vessels spoke to their passengers with gentle voices. Parents comforted children by explaining they were heroes who would save other families. Even the children seemed to understand and accept their fate. "Mommy, will it hurt?" a 5-year-old girl asked over the Morning Star's intercom. "Only for a second, sweetheart. Then we'll be safe forever, and so will all the other children." The coalition had expected panic, fear, desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, they found humans treating death as just another way to protect their people. Zixathara finished his drink and looked at the young aliens around his table. Their faces showed the same horror he had felt when first reading those transcripts. "That is the third rule of fighting humans," he said quietly. "They will die for people they have never met, not just soldiers, all of them. Children, grandparents, merchants, teachers. All of them." A young soldier with green fur asked, "But why? What drives them to such extremes?" "I have studied humans for years trying to answer that question," Zixathara replied. "The best explanation I can give is this. Humans believe that protecting others, especially the innocent, is worth any sacrifice. They would rather die as heroes than live as cowards." The night was getting late at the cantina on Kepler Station. Commander Zixathara noticed that word of his stories had spread. Alien officers from other ships had quietly joined the crowd around his table. They all wanted to hear about the humans. They all needed to understand what they might face. A veteran soldier with scarred purple skin spoke up. "Commander, the stories you tell are disturbing, but surely humans have limits. Surely they can be broken like any other species." Zixathara's laugh was dry and bitter. Broken? You think humans can be broken? He ordered another drink. Let me tell you about Firebase Alpha. Let me tell you why no sane commander ever tries to outlast humans in a siege. The crowd grew larger as other aliens stopped their conversations to listen. Even the bartender, a large creature with 6 arms, stopped cleaning glasses to hear the tale. Firebase Alpha was built on a worthless piece of rock called Hadley's World. The planet had no resources, no strategic value, no reason for anyone to fight over it. But it sat on the border between human and coalition space. Control of the planet meant control of 3 important trade routes. The base itself was small, just 200 human soldiers commanded by Major Tony Clark. Clark was a quiet man who had spent 20 years in the human military. He was known for being steady and reliable, but not brilliant. No one expected him to make history. The coalition sent Admiral Korvash to take the planet. Korvash was famous for his siege warfare. He had starved out enemy positions on 7 different worlds. He brought 5,000 soldiers and a plan to surround the base and wait for the humans to surrender. It will be easy, Korvash told his officers. The humans have limited food and water. We control the space around the planet. They cannot be resupplied or reinforced. They will surrender within a month. The siege began on a cold morning in the planet's winter season. Coalition forces surrounded Firebase Alpha and settled in to wait. They built comfortable camps with good food and warm shelters. This was going to be a waiting game, and they were prepared to wait as long as necessary. Major Clark received Admiral Korvash's surrender demand on the first day of the siege. Major Clark, you are surrounded and cut off from all support. Surrender now and your soldiers will be treated according to galactic law. Clark's response was simple and direct. Admiral, we decline your offer. Firebase Alpha will remain under human control. Major, be reasonable. You have 200 soldiers against 5,000. You have supplies for perhaps a month. We can wait much longer than that. Admiral, we'll see about that. The first month passed exactly as Korvash predicted. The humans conserved their food and water carefully. They ran patrols and maintained their defenses, but they did not attempt any major attacks. Everything seemed normal. In the second month, coalition scouts reported that the humans were eating smaller meals. Their energy levels appeared lower. Some soldiers showed signs of hunger. Korvash felt confident that victory was near. Soon they will start fighting each other for food, he told his staff. Humans are selfish creatures. They will turn on each other when resources become scarce. But the coalition scouts were wrong. The humans were not fighting each other. Instead, they were sharing everything equally. When food ran low, everyone ate less. When water was rationed, everyone got the same amount. No exceptions. Sergeant Holly Martinez became the symbol of human endurance during the siege. She was a small woman who had joined the military to pay for college. She planned to become a teacher after her service ended. But on Hadley's World, she became something else. During the third month of the siege, Martinez was severely injured when a coalition mortar round hit her position. Shrapnel tore through her left arm and damaged her ribs. The base medical officer, Dr. Chris Baker, told her she needed surgery and weeks of recovery. Doc, how long before I can return to duty? Martinez asked. Holly, you need at least a month of bed rest, maybe 2 months. That's too long. Patch me up and get me back on the line. Dr. Baker was shocked. Sergeant, you could die if you don't rest properly. Your body needs time to heal. Martinez looked at him with tired but determined eyes. Doc, if I rest for 2 months, my squad mates will have to cover my sector. They're already exhausted and hungry. I won't let them carry my weight. Baker tried to argue, but Martinez would not listen. 3 days later, she was back on patrol with her arm in a makeshift sling and bandages wrapped around her chest. She stayed on duty for the remaining 5 months of the siege. By the 4th month, the humans were eating things that most species would consider inedible. They mixed tree bark with their remaining rations to make the food last longer. They caught and ate insects. They boiled leather from their equipment to make soup. But they never complained. Coalition forces listening to human radio transmissions expected to hear arguments, desperation, talk of surrender. Instead, they heard jokes, stories, and planning for the future. When we get home, I'm going to eat a whole pizza by myself, Private Jimmy Watson said during a radio check. Just one pizza? Amateur, replied Corporal Sandra Lee. I'm going to eat pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a week. You're both thinking too small, Martinez added. I'm going to open a restaurant that serves nothing but the foods we've been dreaming about out here. The coalition soldiers listening to these transmissions began to feel uncomfortable. The humans were starving, but they sounded like they were planning a vacation. In the 5th month, the situation became truly desperate. The humans were down to their emergency rations, which were supposed to last only 1 week. They had no medical supplies left. Several soldiers were wounded and could not be properly treated. Admiral Corvash sent another surrender demand. Major, Clark, your position is hopeless. Your soldiers are starving and wounded. End this madness and surrender. Clark's response came after a long delay. His voice was weaker than before, but still firm. Admiral, we are still here. Firebase Alpha remains under human control. Major, I have reports that your soldiers are dying of hunger and disease. How can you ask them to continue this suffering? Admiral, I did not ask them to continue. They chose to continue. That is the difference between humans and other species. This was true. During the 5th month, Major Clark had called a meeting of all his soldiers. He explained their situation honestly. They were out of food, medical supplies, and hope of rescue. Anyone who wanted to surrender could do so without shame. Not one soldier chose to surrender. Private Watson, who had lost 30 pounds and could barely stand, spoke for all of them. Sir, with respect, we came here to hold this base. Nothing has changed. We still have ammunition, we still have fighting spirit, and we still have each other. Let's see how long we can make this last. The 6th month brought new horrors. Several soldiers developed infections that should have been fatal. They continued fighting anyway. Corporal Lee lost 2 fingers to frostbite but refused to leave her post. Lieutenant Carlos Rivera broke his leg in a fall but crawled to his duty station every day. The humans began scavenging equipment from their own base. They burned furniture for heat. They used metal scraps to repair their weapons. They made new clothes from torn tents and blankets. Waste nothing, use everything. Keep fighting. Dr. Baker performed surgery with improvised tools and no anesthesia. His patients bit down on pieces of wood to keep from screaming, and returned to duty as soon as they could walk. He operated by candlelight when the base generators failed, but the most disturbing thing was the human morale. As conditions got worse, their spirits seemed to get stronger. They sang songs during the coldest nights. They told stories to keep each other awake during watch duty. They planned elaborate meals they would cook when the siege ended. In the 7th month, coalition forces began to break. The siege was supposed to be easy. They were supposed to be relaxing while the humans starved. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to acknowledge defeat. Some coalition soldiers requested transfers to other units. Others began having nightmares about the humans in the base. How do you fight enemies who treat suffering as just another challenge? To overcome, Admiral Corvash increased the bombardment, hoping to break human morale. It had the opposite effect. The humans used the rubble from destroyed buildings to improve their fortifications. They collected metal fragments from coalition shells to make new tools and weapons. Sir, they're using our own ammunition against us, reported Corvash's intelligence officer. They've turned shell fragments into knives and spear points. They're melting down the metal to repair their equipment. The 8th month marked the breaking point for the coalition forces. They had been sitting in comfortable camps eating good food while watching humans survive on nothing. The psychological pressure was enormous. Coalition soldiers began making mistakes. They fired at shadows. They reported human attacks that never happened. Some units requested permission to assault the base directly rather than continue the siege. No, Corvash told them. We stick to the plan. The humans must surrender soon. But the humans showed no signs of surrender. Sergeant Martinez, now skeletal, thin and barely able to stand, was still making her daily patrols. Dr. Baker continued treating patients with no medical supplies. The cantina was packed now. Word had spread throughout Kepler Station about Commander Zixthera's stories. Alien officers from dozens of ships had gathered to hear about human warfare. The air was thick with tension and fear. An old coalition general with battle scars covering his gray hide pushed through the crowd. Commander Zixthera, I served in the 3rd Galactic War. I commanded fleets against the humans. Your stories are disturbing, but they describe small battles. What about the big picture? Surely the coalition's superior numbers would win a total war. Zixathara looked at the scarred general with something like pity in his ancient eyes. General, you want to know about the big picture? You want to know why we made peace instead of finishing the war? He gestured for the general to sit. Let me tell you about the Battle of Sol. Let me tell you why we stopped fighting. The cantina grew completely quiet. Even the bartender stopped moving. Everyone knew about the Battle of Sol. It was the last major battle of the war, the one that led to the peace treaty. But no one knew the real story. Sol was the human home system. Earth, their birth world, orbited the star they called Sun. It was the heart of human civilization, where their species had begun its journey to the stars. If the coalition could take Sol, the war would be over. High Command assembled the largest fleet in galactic history, 10,000 warships from 50 different worlds. Every species in the coalition contributed ships and crews. It was an armada that could conquer entire sectors. Admiral Zixathara commanded the invasion fleet from his massive flagship, the galaxy's pride. He was the coalition's greatest military mind, the architect of victories on 100 worlds. If anyone could crush the humans, it was him. The human fleet defending Sol numbered only 800 ships. They were commanded by Admiral Carl Johnson from Earth's Orbital Defense Station and Admiral Nina Rodriguez from the Mars Fleet Command. Both were experienced officers, but they faced impossible odds. 10,000 ships against 800. Admiral Zixathara told his staff as the fleet approached Sol. This will be the shortest battle in galactic history. Intelligence reports confirmed what everyone expected. The human military was concentrated around Earth and Mars. Their industrial worlds were lightly defended. A few quick strikes would cripple human war production and force surrender. But as the coalition fleet entered the Sol system, something unexpected happened. Every civilian ship in the system began moving toward the invasion fleet. Sir, we're detecting massive movement from human civilian vessels, reported the sensor officer. Cargo ships, passenger liners, mining vessels, personal craft, they're all heading in our direction. Admiral Zixathara studied the tactical display with confusion. Are they evacuating, running away? No, sir. They appear to be moving to intercept our fleet. This made no sense. Civilian ships should be fleeing from a war zone, not flying toward it. But the sensors did not lie. Thousands of human civilian vessels were accelerating toward the coalition armada. The first ship to reach them was an old cargo hauler called the Happy Trader. Captain Lucy Stone had been hauling freight between Earth and the asteroid mines for 20 years. She was a grandmother with silver hair and gentle eyes. Her co-pilot was her 16-year-old grandson Billy. Coalition Fleet. This is Captain Stone of the civilian vessel Happy Trader. You are approaching Earth space with hostile intent. Turn. Back now. Admiral Zixathara could not believe what he was hearing. Captain Stone, you are in a cargo ship facing a military fleet. Withdraw immediately for your own safety. Admiral, with respect, I will not withdraw. Earth is my home. These are my people. If you want to hurt them, you'll have to go through me first. The Happy Trader was joined by other civilian ships. The passenger liner Golden Dream carried tourists and families. The mining ship Rockhopper was crewed by rough asteroid miners. The yacht Starlight belonged to a wealthy businessman. They came from every walk of human life. But the most disturbing part was the crews. These were not soldiers. They were teachers, farmers, shopkeepers, students. Children as young as 12 operated weapon systems. Elderly humans in their 80s piloted attack craft. Captain Stone's granddaughter Sarah, only 14 years old, manned the Happy Trader's improvised gun turret. She had learned to shoot by hunting rabbits on the family farm. Now she was preparing to fight alien warships. Grandma Lucy, are we really going to fight all those big ships? Sarah asked over the intercom. Yes, sweetheart. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies even when they're bigger than you. Are we going to win? Captain Stone looked at the massive enemy fleet filling her view screen. 10,000 ships against a few hundred civilian vessels. Probably not, dear. But we're going to try anyway. Admiral Zixathara watched in growing horror as more civilian ships arrived. They came from every corner of the Sol system. Families flew personal shuttles loaded with improvised explosives. College students crewed research vessels armed with mining equipment. Even children piloted small craft beside their parents. Sir, we count over 2 million civilian vessels now, the sensor officer reported. And more are coming. 2 million ships. The coalition fleet was outnumbered, 200 to 1 by human civilians. But these were not warships. They were converted cargo haulers, passenger liners, and private craft. Most had no armor and minimal weapons. Yet they kept coming. The mining ship Deep Strike was typical. Captain Joe Brown had spent his life digging ore from asteroids. His crew of 12 included his wife Martha, his 2 sons, and 9 neighbors from his mining station. They had welded mining lasers to their ship's hull and loaded the cargo bay with explosives. "Betty," Captain Brown called to his teenage daughter, "you don't have to do this. You can take an escape pod back to the station." "Dad, we're fighting for Earth, for home. I'm not running away." Similar conversations happened on thousands of ships. Human families chose to fight together rather than abandon their world. Parents and children crewed the same vessels. Grandparents operated weapons while grandchildren piloted ships. The coalition forces began to feel something they had never experienced before: moral horror. They had come to fight human soldiers, not children and elderly civilians. But the humans gave them no choice. Admiral Zixneth tried one last time to avoid the slaughter. "Attention, human civilian vessels. You are not military combatants. Withdraw now, and you will not be harmed." The response came from Captain Stone aboard the Happy Trader. Her voice was calm and steady, like she was discussing the weather. "Admiral, you came here to conquer our world, to hurt our families, to take away everything we love. We can't let that happen. Captain, you have no chance of victory. You will all die. Yes, we probably will. But some of you will die with us. And maybe that will give our military fleet a chance to protect Earth." As Captain Stone spoke, her granddaughter Sarah was singing softly in the background, an old Earth song about home and family. The song was picked up by other ships. Soon thousands of human voices were singing together across the radio waves. Children sang lullabies their mothers had taught them. Adults sang songs from their school days. Elderly humans sang traditional folk songs passed down through generations. The entire civilian fleet sang as they flew towards certain death. Admiral Zixneth had conquered 50 worlds. He had ordered the deaths of millions of enemy soldiers. But he had never faced anything like this. How do you fight children who sing as they prepare to die? Many coalition ships began to break formation. Captains refused orders to fire on civilian targets. Entire crews abandoned their posts rather than participate in what felt like mass murder. "Sir, we're losing cohesion," reported Zixneth's tactical officer. 17 ships have withdrawn without orders. Others are refusing to target civilian vessels. The first attack came when a human garbage scow piloted by an 80-year-old woman rammed a coalition destroyer. The old woman had loaded her ship with nuclear waste and flown it directly into the enemy vessel. Both ships were destroyed instantly. This began the human-civilian assault. Thousands of converted ships attacked the coalition fleet. They had no military training, no advanced weapons, no hope of victory, but they fought anyway. A school transport filled with teenage volunteers destroyed a coalition cruiser. A medical ship crewed by doctors and nurses took out an enemy frigate. A luxury yacht owned by a billionaire's family eliminated a coalition command vessel. The psychological impact was devastating. Coalition soldiers found themselves shooting at ships crewed by human children. They watched families die together in the cold vacuum of space. Many aliens broke down completely and could not continue fighting. But the most terrifying moment came when the human military fleet finally engaged. Admiral Johnson and Admiral Rodriguez had used the civilian sacrifice to position their forces perfectly. The 800 human warships struck the confused and demoralized coalition fleet with devastating precision. The battle that should have lasted hours was over in 30 minutes. The coalition fleet was destroyed or scattered. Admiral Zixneth died when his flagship was rammed by a human hospital ship, crewed by volunteer medical students. Of the 10,000 coalition ships, fewer than 1,000 escaped. The human military lost 200 vessels. But the civilian casualties were enormous. Over 1 million human civilians died defending their home system.